So I would like for you guys to welcome Violet. Say multidisciplinary QA test specialist. I got a couple of you guys mentioned at the beginning of the semester you had some interest in that side of the production process. And as we inch closer towards the end of you guys finalizing your proof of concepts, I think this topic is something that even though we are not going to necessarily be doing a deep dive into if like QA testing of your product or what it is you guys are generating, I want you thinking about it because it does play a role in how we design our spaces. I also want you to start thinking about the different platforms or mediums that you guys are designing for. We had a little bit of VR experience, although it was a bit limited because we couldn't get in the headsets in 342. Although I think, fingers crossed, I have that remedied for next year. But um, I want you thinking about that space, even though we weren't quite able to test for it, along with the spaces that you have been designing for. So on-screen stuff, desktop stuff, whether it's mobile devices, consoles, situation, or pre-rendered stuff, or it's interactive spaces. So Violet has some expertise in software testing, game dev, digital marketing, um, is skilled in agile workflows, specifically documentation, test planning, bug tracking across a wide range of testing tools. Known for blending technical precision with creative vision to deliver quality user experiences. So Violet is really her role is really centered around that UX piece that we keep talking about. So I am not going to say too much more. I'm going to give the floor to Violet, and at the end, we'll do questions if you have them. Sound good? All right, rock on.
Hi, thank you everyone for having me. Let's get so yes, as Nikki said, my name is Violet, Violet Bear. I am I come from quality assurance. I want to get the slideshow up here.
So I'm slide over to that one, and that should work.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. All right, now we got my slideshow. So my name is Violet Bear. I work in quality assurance. I'm really happy to be here and talk to you guys about worlds. Specifically, for the past 2 years, I was working in VR quality assurance with Meta in the States. I recently moved to New Zealand. I've been developing games for over 15 years. It started when I was 7 years old with an obsession for things like Scott Pilgrim, Spider-Man, and Star Wars, and I'd make fan games online. And this eventually led to me making a fan game called Smash Combat, which got over 200,000 players and made me want to enter the gaming industry full time. That's definitely what inspired me. The comments and all the people having fun with the world I created made me just so happy, so beyond happy. And more recently, I was hired by Meta and I was working on a game called Asgard's Wrath 2. This is a VR title, an RPG where you level up, you got all the basic RPG things, you have a skill tree. It's a pretty fun time. I genuinely recommend it. And after that, I was working for some time on Horizon Worlds. This is a user. Let's exit that out, whatever is going on there. Um, Horizon Worlds is a user platform, so different people can make different worlds. You could go in there and make on a headset and make a world yourself using assets you create. So yeah, that's a little about me. I also make my own indie games. I recently showed at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo in Portland, Oregon, and that was a really good time. I showed off a game I made, an indie platformer. Now, why is quality assurance important? You'd be surprised how often multi-million dollar companies will send you a build and say it's ready for release, and there will be super easy ways to make the game crash. We had at one time where I can't say what project I'll be going into NDA, but we had at one time where we were sent a build where just playing as a specific character caused an instant crash of the headset. And yeah, no, it wasn't ideal at all. But the job in QA with testing your games and testing your worlds is to make sure worlds don't release in that quality. So you're going to want to play it again and again and again until it's in a state where it is fun for the player. So this is some great footage of why QA is important. This comes from a AAA game on launch. Some of you might recognize it from the footage alone.
Yeah.
Who here knew what that game was? Yeah, yeah. So for anyone who didn't know, that is footage from Cyberpunk 2077. First impressions matter a lot. If you release a title or a world that you didn't test, it will hurt the first impression, and a lot of users will be scared away from your project. This is true for VR titles, it's true for indie games, and it's even true for AAA titles. I can say personally that I've never played Cyberpunk 2077, and the launch definitely had something to do with that. Our job in QA is to ensure video games don't release looking like this. As mentioned in the slide, this is a screenshot of a graphical bug from Sonic Colors Ultimate at launch, specifically the Nintendo Switch edition. These lights would flash and had the potential to cause seizures. A lot of people got refunds, me included. I'm a huge Sonic fan. I had the game pre-ordered, and when I saw this on my Nintendo Switch, I immediately called Sega and demanded a refund because frankly, this is unacceptable, right? A AAA company should never be releasing a game like this. And even indie devs have a responsibility not to release a game like this. You need to test thoroughly so that your game is fun for the user and also safe. And also safe. Yeah, don't cause a seizure. There are some different quality assurance categories that we use to designate different types of testing. Ad-Hoc is a type of testing where you go into your world or your game and you creatively test without specific rules or parameters. So Ad-Hoc really relies on your creativity. Smoke testing is a test that is generally done every time you make a new iteration of a build or a world. And it's a quick run over to make sure everything functions as expected. Base functionality, are the textures loading properly? Are the models showing correctly? Does the collision work? Maybe jump on a mountain? Does the UI work? Just a quick check of everything. Performance testing usually involves watching for different measures of performance, like frames per second. A specific kind of performance testing is load testing, where you try to overwhelm the system by doing a large amount of things at once, or maybe putting a large amount of players into the game if it's a multiplayer game. I give everyone a second to type here. It's my way of saying I needed water. Compatibility testing is testing your world or game on different devices. So if you're releasing on PC, does it work on different OSs, right? Does it work on different kinds of PCs that it's available to be downloaded on? This is important to check because sometimes a game might work on your computer, but it won't work on your friend who hasn't updated from Windows 10, right? And that's important to know. Accessibility testing, this is one of my favorite kinds of testing. It's making sure that the game is accessible to all people. So, can the game be understood by someone with color blindness? That's really important to check, and that's important to check in your worlds. Do the colors blend together for someone with color blindness? It's great to put an option down to change the colors if that's the case. Some modern games like Splatoon do this. I know that in default Splatoon, sometimes the team colors might mix for someone with red-green color blindness, but you can turn on a colorblind setting to evade that. Regression testing is testing older bugs and issues on a newer version of your project. So let's say you had an issue where you fell through the floor, you fixed it, 10 builds later, you test it again. That's a regression. And acceptance testing is testing your world or build against external guidelines. So, kind of like if you had a project coming up and you had specific criteria for the world you were making, you double check and test that your world follows that criteria before sending the project to your professor. Bugs hurt the end user experience, and testing in as many ways as possible is crucial to making your games fun. So, a bit more on ad hoc testing. We're kind of going to run through some of these categories. Ad hoc testing is open ended, as mentioned earlier. It really relies on your creativity to find issues, right? One of my favorite examples of ad hoc testing is with a calculator app on a computer. So, one way you could test is you could try adding numbers together, hitting enter, making sure the correct number comes out. Try multiplying numbers, hitting enter, making sure the correct number comes out, right? Dividing, doing all the different math problems. What happens when you enter letters, right? That's something you'd want to check if you're testing a calculator application. What happens if you enter nothing and hit enter? What happens if you enter symbols? What happens if you keep the app open for 10 hours straight, spamming the one key, right? Quality assurance is monotonous, it's boring, but it can reveal your software's deficits. And that is essential because understanding the world you're building and the software you're building is so important for making it fun and making it work because every player plays a game differently. So, yeah, everyone's ad hoc testing looks a little different. Getting a peer, whether it's a colleague or another student, to try out your world uh, often locates more bugs. Some players might do things in a way you simply wouldn't. Something I do that really bothers people when I play multiplayer games is I can't help but run in circles. I have way too much energy, and that sometimes leads to collision bugs other people wouldn't find. Ad hoc testing is great because it can be combined with other forms of testing like performance or compatibility. If you just get creative during a performance test, you can find really unique issues because some bugs have really complex repro steps that involve multiple things. So if you're doing a performance test where you have 10 players in the game and you ad hoc a little and duck and jump and pause the game repeatedly, you might find a unique bug that could only happen when you duck and jump and pause repeatedly with 10 players in the game. Smoke testing is just ensuring basic functionality. Now, this is something I'd say, even if you're making a project for a class, it's great to do. It's important to do at the start of every new build. just to cover all the features of what you're creating. So, is there UI in your title? Is there inventory? Is there collision? Test the basics, but don't overdo it during a smoke. A smoke is meant to do right after making a build. So you don't want to test every weapon in your game with 1,000 different weapons and skins. That's going to take way too much time. Test 10 or so weapons, then move on to the characters, then move on to another feature. Performance testing. During performance testing, you're going to want to use usually external applications to keep track of base performance metrics. Some great ones are CPU usage, FPS, and battery life. On the Quest headset, if you're making a VR world, this can be done using something called the OVR metrics tool. You will need developer mode enabled to use OVR metrics, so that is something to keep in mind if you have a Quest headset and want to do that. You're going to need to go into the settings and do that toggle, but then you can find the app on the App Store. On a Windows PC, you can track FPS using the Game Bar application. That's a great way of doing it on Windows. I can't remember the name of the app I used to do it on Android devices, but it's pretty easy to do on Android devices too. I remember it being a pain in the butt to get set up on an iPhone. So if any of you do want to track performance metrics on an iPhone, it might be a pain in the butt. I don't know though. Maybe you're way smarter than me and you'll do it way faster. Test performance in different environments. So if you have different areas in your game, maybe some areas with a lot of trees, some areas with sand, some areas with different particle effects. Test performance in all of them. Don't just test performance in one area. That's really important. It's also great to test performance in different scenarios. So if you have a game with different things, like let's say you're making an RPG and there are boss battles and there are also regular battles, test performance in both. Now, a specific kind of performance testing is load testing. And load testing is throwing everything you have at your software to overwhelm it and see what it can handle. So, what is the max player count of your game? Is it 64 players? Throw 64 players into the game for an hour, see what happens. Try having all testers use the oldest hardware your game is available on, see what happens. Stay in your world for over an hour. Now, this might not seem like something a player would ever do, but sometimes people pause a game and they walk away. And this is something we often don't do as developers testing our games because we're actively working on it. But it's so important when testing your own game to simulate that real life behavior. So, yes, pause your game, leave it on overnight, test it in the morning. It might be completely broken, especially if your world has memory leak. That can be a huge problem and something you might want to code around or fix. Even if it's not relevant for your project at the moment, it's great practice to know how to avoid something like memory leak. Just an aside, memory leak is like a thing for anyone who doesn't know, where things stay in memory for too long without getting out of the system. So let's say assets from a totally different part of the world are still loaded. That can lead to memory leak. Performing many in-game actions at once is another way to load test. So pressing every button, spamming the keyboard, that's a great way to do it, right? It happens. Cats step on keyboards, children play video games, and it's great to test around. Load testing reveals our software's limits, and it helps us adjust our project to ensure it's fun for all players. Compatibility testing is testing software on multiple environments. I mentioned this earlier, but if your world is available on PC, test on multiple PCs and OS systems. Now, mobile titles, they need a lot more testing. Are any of you here making mobile worlds at all? working on mobile projects? No. Okay, good. Because if you are, if you are, and you make it available on even just Apple or just Android devices, what I hate about testing for a mobile project is each different iteration of iPhone and Android devices often have slightly different screen sizes. So you need to like reprogram your UI around that. And it's great to just program like a UI scaling so your system knows how to scale the UI, but that can be really difficult. And then, you think you have it all figured out, and then someone brings out the Galaxy Fold and your whole game breaks. Uh, yeah. Yeah, no, I don't like making mobile projects for that reason. Accessibility testing. This is really important to ensure that all people can play and enjoy your world. If your world has accessibility features, that really helps. So for VR, you should be able to switch between snap turn and smooth turn. Snap turn being a setting where you turn 30 degrees, and smooth being a more natural progression. This makes it so players who experience motion sickness from different kinds of turning can adjust it. Same with teleport movement and smooth locomotion. These settings allow for different players to play differently because some people get more motion sickness from teleport, others get more motion sickness from smooth movement. I get more motion sickness from teleport, which is a bit more on the unusual side. For PC, being able to toggle buttons is really important. So, what I mean by this is if you have a PC game where there is a run key, you should have an accessibility setting in your game where you can press the run key to toggle the run option instead of having to hold it down. Some people have disabilities that makes it hard to press a key continuously. I had a friend who had it and completely avoided any game without this feature. Are game objects and text distinguishable to someone who's colorblind? This is such an important one because, as far as disabilities and issues go, colorblindness is pretty common. I had a friend in middle school I used to play Star Wars Battlefront 2 with. I don't know if any of y'all have played that game. It's great. But we would play like crazy, and we were both pretty evenly matched. But I started to notice that sometimes he'd shoot his own troops, and I started to kind of make fun of him. I'm like, Zachary, you've killed your own guys like 50 times. That's why you always lose. And I'd kind of poke into him. And he told me, well, the health bars are the same color. And I was like, what do you mean they're red and green? He's like, oh, I have red green color blindness. I couldn't tell the difference. And I looked into the settings, there was no way to change that. And then I kind of felt like my wins weren't real wins, so I had some gamer guilt around having teased my friend. But also, that's a feature that I really wish was in that game. And they actually put it into the EA Battlefront remakes, which I thought was pretty cool. So when those games came out, Zachary and I tried them, and we were able to play with him not shooting his own troops every 5 seconds. Uh, can your game be completed by someone who is deaf? This is also a really great accessibility thing to watch for. So if you're making a world, is there audio that is essential to the game to be completed? So let's say instructions or a tutorial. If it happens over audio, you're going to also want some kind of visual cue that teaches the player in case they can't hear. And what's great about a lot of different accessibility features is it doesn't only help disabled people, right? Because some people might want to play their game with the volume turned off and with music on in the background. So if your game is designed so it can be played by someone who is deaf, that means it's also designed so someone can play it with the volume off. That means if someone is in a room with a lot of people talking and it's really loud, they can still play and enjoy your game without issue. Regression testing is retesting a bug or issue that was fixed previously on a newer build. Sometimes in newer iterations of our worlds or projects, old issues will rear their head again. And it's important to continue testing for them, even if we think they're gone completely. And it's also great to keep in mind you may find new bugs when regression testing. I have seen a lot of people test their projects and start to think, okay, I've played the water level of my video game 5,000 times. I don't need to play it anymore. It works perfectly. They edit one tiny line in the collision code, and it makes the game work so much better on all the other levels, and they don't check their water level. And guess what? Their water level doesn't work anymore. You need to keep testing things even after you've tested them before. Quality assurance is really repetitive. Making sure your game is amazing is repetitive because sometimes bugs only occur 1 out of 1,000 times, and other times new bugs come up in places you've already worked on. Acceptance testing means to test your game against external guidelines. So make sure your world or video game meets the criteria of the class you're in or the company you're working for. If you are releasing a project, rating it appropriately. It's really important. Whether it's 10 plus, 13 plus, or 18 plus, right? Rate it appropriately and make sure you understand the ratings because it can get kind of tricky legally if you rate your game incorrectly. And yeah, it's no fun. So yeah, I made this Horizon world in 5 minutes. Don't worry, all your guys' worlds are better. This isn't meant to put you guys to shame. You'll see. Yeah, so I'm a little stuck. I'm a little trapped here. The only way to get out of this collision trap, is a game reset. So reason I showed that is because those two bugs shown in the video are incredibly common bugs I've seen in untested projects made by AAA companies. And we see this whether it's Nintendo or Microsoft or Amazon, right? Z fighting is really common. The flashing texture you see is called Z fighting. It's when two textures were placed at the exact same point in space and are fighting to be seen by the player. Now, usually it's seen in much smaller quantities than what you see it in here, but if you have different textures overlapping in your world, it'll probably cause Z fighting. So definitely watch out for that. And collision trapping the player, forcing a world or game reset. This is so common. I see it in the background of mountains in video games. You run around, you maybe if you park multiple moving objects together like cars, you can get trapped between them, right? And this is really common in projects I've seen developers put out and send to QA. So it's great to always thoroughly test your world, whether it be the collision or the visuals, before sending it off. So that's all. Feel free to ask any questions if you have any.